Today's guest is Michael Stewart. He's a writer, actor, artist and filmmaker. Several of his plays have been professionally staged, including his adaptation of Dracula at the Leicester Square Theatre in London. His works appeared on Radio 4. His book, King Crow, won the Not the Booker Prize by The Guardian, and he's head of creative writing at the University of Huddersfield. In today's podcast, Michael talks about Edgar Allan Poe, the Brontes, The Last Wolf in England, writing nonstop for 20 years, the English Civil War, growing up in Salford, and our mutual love for Eugene Chadwick. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Michael.
From one Michael to another. And thank you for letting us come into your little Holy of Holies. This lovely little office here at South Square, which this place is a place I know very well because I've done some performances here and stuff.
Well, the first time I saw you perform, in fact, as a band, was here at South Square in the courtyard, and you sang Big Bloody Armchair and Painting the Walls White, which was very appropriate because the walls are all white at South Square.
Yeah, apart from these burgundy ones.
I'm booking the trend, Mick.
Yeah. No, there's a nice sort
It's
of...
actually written in my contract that the walls have to be white, so I'm rebelling against my contract.
Right. Well, you've just made us a cup of coffee, and you were starting to talk about Eugene Chadwick, who's a musician that I was turned on to by my brother Peter years ago. Chadwick is he had a band called Psychobilly, and they used to do T-Rex covers and Michael Jackson covers. They do Solid Gold, Easy Action, and they do Billie Jean, but they basically destroy the song. And he's from a kind of experimental music background, and he's in a book that I've just written, that I've just done recently, which
I've just read and really enjoyed, and we share lots of interests. I think actually a lot of the people you picked are people that I also have a lot of interest in. But Eugene Chadwick was new to me. I haven't come across him before, so thank you for the introduction. I immediately went on YouTube and discovered all kinds of fantastic performances.
Yeah.
What a guy, what a performer. I mean, not just technically brilliant, but also just ripping up country music and other genres and just spitting it out in a completely different context. It's great.
The last thing I listened to, he did a version of a Beatles medley. And he does a version of Taxman and Day Tripper, and it's like David Lynch. It's Lynchian. It's very disturbing. It's really beautiful, and he's having so much fun. And he's an old guy just gibbering away there, messing and pulling and tweaking with his love of music. As long as he has a love there.
What you see when you see him perform is someone who's not self-conscious at all, who's just in the moment, who's not aware of being a performer. Is just taken away with what he's doing, and the enthusiasm and the zeal is just apparent, isn't it? From the offset.
He eats it up. He relishes it. I mean, I just remember he did a version of Are You Experienced with balloons stuffed underneath his t-shirt, and he was rubbing a balloon on the string of his banjo, and it's wrong in some, but also just it's very, very crazy and sexy and daft. And
well, there was I think somewhere in New York he was performing, and I think he had a saw and he was sawing through one of the instruments.
He came to Leeds and he played the Duchess, and he's got a great song called It Takes Longer Saying No than it takes longer saying yes than saying no.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, it's great.
Just, oh my God, this is one more letter. I'll never forget her. It takes longer saying yes than saying no. And then he goes off into this really kind of whinging sort of diatribe about stuff. He gets really kind of annoyed and irritated by stuff, and he mutters. He loves muttering, and he gets. You having to sort of crane your ears to it. He's just off in his world. Basically, he plugs in, and then he doesn't need an audience.
Yeah.
But
so Julie was just chatting a minute back about books, and Mick's got his new book, and you're working on the book about the last wolf in England, is it?
Yeah. I've just finished a draft of it. It's been sent to my agent, and I'm waiting to hear what she says about it, really. But yeah, I've been spending lockdown researching the 17th century, researching wolves, witches, the Civil War, all kinds of North England history as well. I'm surrounded by the books I've been using to research, and yeah, I got really interested in the idea of the last wolf as a kind of symbol, really. Casting our minds back to Brexit, which now seems to been overtaken by COVID, doesn't it, really? But at the time, I was just looking for a time in our history when we'd been so divided, when mother and daughter were divided, and brother and father and son, whatever, within a household. It just struck me that it was very interesting to see that we were divided, not necessarily along political lines, or familial lines, or any of those things, really. This was something that's cut right the way through our psyche, our collective psyche. And going back to the Civil War, and reading those accounts, you had brother fight brother, royalists fight parliamentarians, roundheads, cavaliers. So within a family, you would have this division. So I went back to that time, really, to look at that divided country. And in doing so, also saw the persecution that was going on with lots of working class women who were, cunning women, if you like, women who were using herbs and healing through, what we would call natural kind of products. And putting those things together, really, just putting those things together. I mean, what's really interesting is that we don't know when the last wolf in England died. We do know about Scotland, we do know about Ireland. There are documents of that. I'm looking at a book now there, The Last Wolf, which was written years and years ago, over 100 years ago, talks about an alleged hunt of the last wolf in England, but it's just an anecdote, really. But it was quite close to here in Lancashire. So I just started looking at this idea, that maybe around this time of the interregnum, there may have been a wolf.
And you were saying there's a story behind it about a chap whose son was killed by a wolf or something.
Yeah. Well, it starts off actually with Claire. So Claire's a 13-year-old girl, and she comes down for breakfast one day. Her family are Irish. Father's a farm labourer. And there are 7 men in the house with muskets, and they've killed her father. He's on the floor, he's in a puddle of his own blood. Her mother's been tied to a chair and gagged, and the leader, a guy called Lemuel Lane, who's just come back from the Civil War, he's been fighting as a parliamentarian against the Royalists, defeated them. And he's a very brutal guy. And he basically says to her, look, you've got a choice. He hands her a pistol. He says, either these men either you shoot your mother, or these half dozen men will do your mother, and then we'll shoot her. So what's it to be? Half a dozen men and death. So she does something which plays havoc with a kind of it's a dilemma basically. But she shoots her mother through the head, and then they tell her basically, this is ours now. This is our property. If our men are going to come back to secure it, if you're still here, we're going to kill you. So she burns the house down and she runs away. What happens after that is his son, his only son, is killed by the wolf, and he puts a bounty on the wolf's head. And this bounty is so large, £100 then, it's such a phenomenal amount of money. It brings in the baddest dudes from all over, not just from England. There's a guy from Sweden called Johan Hellstrom, who's a complete maniac, And it sets up this.
So it's kind of it's Lord of the Rings meets a few dollars more.
It's very much a Western, actually. I grew up watching Clint Eastwood films, and I like revenge stories. Legend of the Josie Wales and Pale Rider and all that kind of stuff.
And what year we're talking with this?
So it's 1649. So Charles has been executed in January of that year. This is October. The 1st of November it starts, in fact, of 1649. So Cromwell's just come back from Ireland. He's butchered, hundreds of thousands of people. He's sent them over to the West Indies to be slaves. So he's come back from this absolute bloody campaign in Ireland. Our king is dead. He's been executed. So this is the year really where everything has been turned upside down. And there's no, I mean, there is a legal system. There is a kind of there is a parliament in place, but it's a rump parliament. So everything's a bit anarchic, really, and people like Lemuel Lane exploit that. You know, the hierarchies have been reversed, and the social kind of strictures have been relaxed, and you've got levellers and diggers and ranters, and it's a bit like the 60s. You've got people practicing free love. Yeah, you've got people practicing free love. Vegetarianism becomes a thing at this point. You know, you've got Winstanley and all these radical thinkers. The Quakers at that point, you know, they're newly formed. They're nothing like the Quakers that we know. They're not pacifists. They're crazy. They're radical people, you know. So you've got this turmoil and this point in our history where we could have gone anywhere.
So it's a bit like the 60s, yeah. It just
it's sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's what it is.
War, love, sex, drugs, rock and roll,
with witches and wolves involved.
and witches and wolves as well. So it's a great moment, really, to think about stories, you know.
Because there's some there's been some movements in, I think, in Scotland, and they're reintroducing wolves back in the wild, and in America it's been quite successful.
I mean, America's been a revelation, hasn't it? Yellowstone Park, they reintroduced wolves, and in a very short period of time it completely transformed that landscape, you know. It's so biodiverse now. There's been a big movement in Scotland which has had a huge backlash, actually, and I think you know, we're not quite ready yet to
and also this period of time we've got the lockdown, so there is stuff like everybody's kind of indoors, and basically animals are sort of filtering out from the wilds, and I mean there's goats sort of wandering around wherever.
Well, it's been great to see that, hasn't it? You know, and in the towns, the goats have come down from the mountains and
but also things like sort of like I've noticed in the gardens, things like the butterflies and bees and the species of sort things that they've had a respite, and they're there's a sense of almost like rebirth. As well as
there's two sort of philosophies competing in the book, and one is represented by the men who are hunting the wolf, and one is represented by the women who are protecting the wolf. And the two philosophies are one is the kind of hierarchical Abrahamic tradition, if you like, that basically, which is, you know, it goes all the way through to humanism as well. You know what I mean? It's basically that we are, you know, we have a hierarchical structure, and we're at the apex of that hierarchy, and we have been given the job by God or by ourselves, whether you're humanist or whether you believe in God. But basically, we've been given this task to look after the animals, or abuse the animals, or farm, or do whatever we want to the animals. And conservation is part of that. We're still meddling, even if it's for good. You know what I mean? We're still saying we are playing God. It's our job to sort this mess out. We've sorted the mess, we've created the mess, we saw the mess. So even conservationists are part of this idea that we are the solution, the problem and the solution. Where the women represent a different system, which is basically we are just part of a matrix, we are just part of a system, and we are part of a thread, and if you pull any of these threads, the whole thing falls apart. And the whole problem with looking at the world in this way, or seeing ourselves as exceptional or different, putting ourselves outside of the natural world, is why we're in the mess that we're in now. You know what I mean? And we're seeing this now, as you say, you know, with lockdown, we're seeing that actually, once we take ourselves out of this, the world's quite happy without us. You know, it's getting on just fine.
Kind of you look at it and you think, actually, the world. You look at it and you see the trees look lovely. There's a certain kind of order that sort of seemed to have like re-emerged. And you're thinking, it's something, because it almost talked. It could be that there's nothing nasty going on in the world. You just think, my God, it's a beautiful sky. It's everything's growing and fecund and stuff, and basically there's like we've got more badgers and hedgehogs now and kites and stuff, and there's eagles coming back, and there's a sign of some kind of like hooded vulture or something that was.
We had a vulture over Derbyshire. A few weeks back.
So this
incredible.
So there's something quite sort of. There's this sort of strands of something new, you know. There's in among all the kind of anxiety of this COVID stuff, you know.
Well, I hope so, and I hope what it's doing in a way is checking us and saying, you know, we are vulnerable. We're not gods, you know, and we can be wiped off the face of the earth, and this virus is a moderate one in comparison to other viruses we've tackled. But just watch yourself and don't think, don't get too big for your boots.
There's three of us sitting here, and I know I'm quite anxious about our well-being. I want you to get your book sorted. I want you to do well, and I don't want you to die of COVID. And I want Johnny to be all right as well. And the windows are open, and it's a case of it's a really strange time. Yeah. There's a sense of it's playtime. Yeah. This is a long extended sort of holiday, but at the same time, it's a holiday with a price almost. You think, you can't relax too much. It's almost like you think, oh yeah, I'll just go and have a swim in that river over there now. And basically then I'll go and eat 16 tons of popcorn. But people are dying. There's 50,000 people have died over in India or something. There was some headlines, I'm not sure. But it's quite, it's off kilter. Yeah. And we're trying to sort of group onto some kind of structure, make some structure. Yeah. But at the same time, it's a magnificent time to be alive. Yeah,
it's a paradox, isn't it? We're struggling with the two things, really.
Well, we're lucky. We're dressed well. Johnny's got his handmade shoes. I've got my tweed suit on, and you've got your
I feel comparatively scruffy.
You've got these posh rings on and stuff, But it's a case of, and you can sit here and just talk about wolves for an hour, whereas some people can't, because they have to. They've got no money, and they have to go out there and face the world and stuff, and they've lost their mum or their dad or something or other, and there's just this extremes in the world, and it's kind of helter skelter. It's this kind of whirl of madness that we're all sort of, and we're trying to sort of find some kind of path through it that feels all right, And I know it's important that I draw and write, and I know it's important that you draw and write. I think, is it important?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without it, really. I think. I was thinking about this today because I've basically written non-stop for the last 20 years. Give or take a day or two.
Yeah, but we're in this lockdown period.
And it's very habit forming, isn't it? And I'm a creature of habit, I guess. I do have a day or two away from the desk, but I do get, antsy if I don't do it.
Because you've got your badge, your writer's badge. That's what you are. Yeah. And so, when did you get your writer's badge? When did you think, I'm a writer?
Well, this guy here, I'm pointing to a death mask of Edgar Allan Poe, which is on my wall, and I keep that there as really a totem, because when I was 11, I had glandular fever. I was hospitalised for 10 weeks. And I came across, my mum used to bring books from the library, because there's nothing else to do, really. And she brought this book of poems. It was poems about childhood, just an anthology of different poets, Wordsworth in there, all kinds. And there was a poem by Edgar Allan Poe called Alone. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were, I have not seen as others saw, I could not bring my passion from a common spring. And I started reading this poem, and it was like a bolt of lightning. It just went right through me. Oh. And I memorised the poem. And when I came out of convalescence, I went to Manchester. I went to Dillon's bookshop in St Anne's Square, and I got the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe. Everything, all the essays, short stories, poems, everything. And just read it from cover to cover. And then started trying to write like Edgar Allan Poe, and doing it badly. Trying to write these stories as a pastiche, I guess, really, trying to ape that style. And you can't, in the 20th century, ape a 19th century style. It just doesn't work, does it? So that was the first time, really, age 11, 12, when I thought, I'd like to write things. I started writing. But, I'm from a working class household in Salford. I didn't know any writers. I never met any writers. The only sort of thing that books that really was Sheila Delaney lived up the road. And I went to a librarian, the Salford Library where I used to go all the time as a kid. I spoke to this librarian. It's before, writers were visible. Now you go to a librarian, you say, do you know any writers? They say, well, Ian Rankin's here on Saturday and J.K. Rowling's on Wednesday. Back in those days, librarians didn't have any connection to writers at all.
Quite as visible, were they?
No. Yeah. And I went to this librarian. I was a bit I fancied her as well, actually, so there was an ulterior motive. So I went to her and I said, do you know any writers, you know? And she went, no, I don't know. She said, hang on a minute, Sheila Delaney lives just up the road, you know. So I found...
Did you know who Sheila Delaney was?
Well, I'd just started secondary school, so I was 12 at this point. I started secondary school. And we'd just started doing Taste of Honey. My English teacher brought the book into class. And we watched the film, first of all.
Yeah. That's really touching, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's touching. Yeah, and it's a good film. It's a great book.
Yeah.
And I got a bit obsessed by Sheila Delaney, and I never had the guts to say hello to her, but I saw her and she looked really exotic, and you know, and I was scared by her, really, you know. I met her niece in a nightclub years after, and I said, you know, I never put the courage up to say hello to her, you know. So that was my only kind of, they exist, they're real, because I can see one. I see her bringing the milk in and, you know, going to the shop and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was years and years after I left school at 16. I worked in factories, then in jobs till I was about 24, 25. And then I thought, what the hell am I doing? You know, I was writing, but I was frustrated. I didn't know what to do or how to do it. And I thought I'd go and study writers. And I went to Leeds Uni and I did English. And I guess that's when I started writing more seriously, you know. And I came out of uni and I started writing plays. I put them on myself. I just did everything. I wrote them, directed them, cast them, produced them. I designed the posters. I wrote the press releases.
You draw as well?
Yeah. And I can show you the artwork, actually. I did for it. And I did the whole thing, basically. I made the tickets. I built the sets. It's insane, really.
Orson Welles.
You know, I did the whole thing and sent myself crazy doing it. You know, and I put these plays on and took them into prison, took them into army, and you know, and that sort of took off, and that's kind of how I got into writing.
Was there a point where you thought, I am a writer? Because I know you teach and I teach and mixed some bits of teaching. Sometimes the students that you work with, there's a point where they definitely feel like they're a musician or they're a writer or they're an artist. Yeah. Do you remember a point where you thought, I'm a writer?
Yeah, I do, and it sounds really mercenary, but the moment I thought that was when a guy called Peter Tarleton, who was the events officer at Armley, he was a minister there, in fact, but he also put on a lot of the entertainment there. Yeah. You know, if you know Armley, there's a multi-faith chapel right in the centre, isn't there? It's like an amphitheatre, like a pit. And you go in there and you put your plays on there, and there's no light rigs or anything like that outside. You just basically, it's an open forum, and you've got bright lights, and you see all these criminals staring at you, you know, and you've got to entertain them. And it was after that performance, and he handed me a cheque for £400. That's when I felt like a writer.
So that was the moment.
Yeah.
Because I can remember when I realised, or I thought I'm a portrait artist, when I was 27. And I'd just drawn a friend of mine in a laundrette in Penn, and it was perfect. It wasn't perfect. I mean, to me it was like, oh my God. And I'd been on the dole for a few years, and I thought, I don't have to be on the dole anymore because I'm a portrait artist. Yeah. I thought that was it. So,
but it is. I mean, it is about the money in a way, because it is that idea that you can survive doing the thing you love.
Yeah.
You know, and I was doing stuff in Salford and Manchester. I was doing performance poetry. It was quite a big scene at the time. This is probably, when was this? Early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. You had people like Len Sissay and Henry Normal and the Tilly Stockbroker. Who else was there? You know,
all big names.
And there was a scene in Manchester, and there was different. There's Frog and Bucket on Newton Street. And there was different venues. You know, you could go there pretty much any night of the week, and you could get up there with your stuff. You didn't get paid for it, but just having that platform. But this was the first time someone handed me a cheque, and I thought, actually, I don't have to do these dead-end jobs. I don't have to be on the dole or doing dead-end jobs. I can make money as a writer. And that was a revelation, actually.
Sometimes it takes that external validation, doesn't it, for someone who believes in you, and there's no better way to show how someone believes in you than paying you, is there?
I think sometimes it's almost like there's an invisible bell as well. That, you know, sometimes you get an external validation, you get whatever. Oh yeah, can you come here and work if we'll give you £1,000 to do 5 days here, you know, workshops or something. Oh my God! So they see me as a. But sometimes you just think, I know what I am. It comes on a Tuesday afternoon. Yeah. That's 4 o'clock. You just finish your coffee and you think, I know what I am. Oh, and it's.
I think one thing about this lockdown is it's enabled a lot of people who have got something they're interested in, like music or writing or drawing or painting or some kind of craft or something, to have the time and headspace to sit down and do it. And I think that's a good thing, because that'll also translate into people being fans again and finding different avenues. Etc.
Yeah, I think so. I think lots of people have wanted to write a book or write a song or bake a loaf of bread or whatever the thing is, and suddenly now
they've got the time to do it.
Absolutely. What that will mean, whether that's a temporary thing, I don't know, but it could be very interesting actually to see what the long-term effects of us becoming more creative as a people.
Yeah, maybe societal value in a different way.
Yeah.
And how do we plan our day from now on? Because there's a sense of, for creative types like us, particularly ones who've got no kind of stage work, it's not quite as sort of as harsh. It's not as stressful, and there's a sense of, well, I've got a lot of time to practice now, practice my craft, or I can go off and just try this other direction, and I've got most artists I know, they're finding some way to get some money, and whether it's to get a couple of £100 from the AMU or something, and it's tiding us over. And most artists don't need a lot of money because they're just obsessed with their art, and so it's a really kind of a bountiful period, because people can do art and not kind of be kind of too stressed out.
And it's like Johnny says, I think if it results in society valuing more artistic endeavours, that will be a fantastic outcome of this, because what we've seen is a gradual erosion, haven't we? Through various government, I say initiatives, they're not the opposite. But certain structural changes that have happened in the education system and in other funding ways as well, the way that the arts are funded and so on, have meant this steady erosion of the value of the arts. And I think if we can re-engage with that, and reinvest in that, then that's definitely a good thing to come out of this.
And we're sat in Thornton in Bradford, and you were just explaining another project you're working on about the connection with Thornton and Haworth and the Brontes, and it's a 200-year anniversary. You've created a walk, is that right?
Well, basically, it's called Bronte 200. This is the culmination of 4 years of bicentenary. So it started in 2016 with Charlotte Bronte's bicentenary, and then Emily's Branwell's in 2017, Emily's in 2018, and then Anne is this year. But it's also the kind of culmination of the project. And I launched in 2018 a Bronte Stones project, which was basically stones in the landscape connecting Thornton to Haworth. I commissioned writers such as Ann Duffy, who was then the Poet Laureate. So Ann Duffy wrote the Charlotte Stone poem, which is on the outside wall of the Bronte birthplace. We got an angle grinder and we cut a hole in the wall and we placed this monolith in the wall. Jeanette Winterson wrote another one of the stones. Kate Bush, which I didn't think would get, commissioned Kate Bush to write a tribute to Emily Bronte. Now, if you know anything about Kate Bush, you'll know, first of all, she owes a career to Emily Bronte because her debut single was called Wuthering Heights, and it's about that book. But you'll also know that they share the same birthday. They're both born on the 31st of July. 2018, 31st of July.
That's my daughter's birthday as well.
Which is incredible, isn't it? Yeah. So 2018, 31st of July, we launched the project. We opened.
There was Jackie Kay as well.
I'll come on to that. But basically, it was Kate Bush's 60th birthday on the same day as it was Emily Bronte's 200th birthday, and it was also 40 years of Wuthering Heights, which came out in '78. So it was a triple anniversary. And Kate wrote the poem, and Pip Hall carved that poem in the middle of the landscape between Haworth and Thornton on the moors on an outcrop of rock called Ogden Kirk, and it's a beautiful, stunning but desolate, perfect spot. And then of course Jackie Kay finally we end the walk at Haworth, and there's a big stone behind the parsonage in what's called Meadows. Parson's Meadow it's called. It's a wild meadow field. Yeah. And there's a huge stone there which Jackie Kay's written, and it's like a homecoming because, again, if you know the story of the Brontes, you'll know that all of the family are buried in the family vault under St Michael's and All Angels Church in Haworth, which is next to the parsonage, except for Anne. She died in Scarborough. She's buried at St Mary's on the precipice overlooking the east, the sea. And it's sort of a homecoming really, because the tombstone that was laid there was full of errors, including they got her age wrong. Yeah, so she was never, it was never fit for purpose basically. And the idea of the stone is that we bring her back, and it triangulates those points, so it stands at the top of this field, sentinel overlooking the parsonage where they all wrote the literary works, and the family vault where they're all buried. So there she is looking out, and then also looking over the moors. But the idea is to connect Thornton with Haworth, because even Bronte fans don't necessarily know this is where they were all born. Anne came back to, they weren't just, when they left in 1820, that wasn't it. They had friends here. The first who lived just here were good friends with Patrick Bronte. In fact, Patrick Bronte proposed to Elizabeth Firth when Maria died in 1821. So there was that connection all the way through the lives, to Thornton, and it's got lost out of the narrative really, and I want to bring that back. So the idea was to devise these walks. Yes, there's a linear walk from Thornton to Haworth, and you can see these stones along the way. But also to have these circular walks to explore all the landscape around this area, and to see, actually, to get the writing, you need to immerse yourself in the landscape. You're not going to get a book like Wuthering Heights just reading it on the page. You've got to smell the heather and the peat, and hear the grouse and the curlew and the wind comb through your hair. It's a sensory, multi-dimensional kind of.
And where can people find the map? Or
well, I would have said at the moment everywhere is locked up, but I would have said the main venues are the parsonage itself, the Bronte birthplace, here at this cafe here at South Square, plenty. Also, lots of bookshops around the area, Bookcase in Hebden Bridge, Book Corner in Halifax, Salt's Books in Salt's Mill.
Yeah.
So all over the place, really. And
it's called the Bronte Stones Walk, and it's a 9-mile route?
Yeah, the linear walk is a 9-mile route, which takes you to all the stones. And but I mean, you can get the maps online as well, and if people want them, they can just email me.
Yeah. And where would they email you, and where online do they get them?
Well, probably the best thing to do is you can go to the website, thebrontestones.com. Dead simple, thebrontestones.com. You can email me at m.stewart@hud.ac.uk. So, yeah, any of those ways, really. There's also a Facebook page.
And is that under your name? Or?
That's under, I think the Facebook page is facebook.com/Bronte Stones, I think.
We'll put some links up on the site as well. Yeah.
So we're talking about the maps, and I guess following on from that really is the book which HarperCollins are bringing out in July next year, July 2021. So I've written a book called Walking the Invisible. It's about the Brontes' lives and landscapes, then and now. So it's a bit of social history as well. Each chapter is a different landscape which has inspired a different Bronte, a different aspect of the writing. Yeah. It starts here in Thornton. The first chapter is Thornton, and Patrick coming to Thornton in 1815, packing a pistol, because he'd been a witness to the Luddite attack on Cartwright's Mill. 100 men armed with muskets and Enoch hammers and tooled up basically.
Enoch hammers?
Enoch hammers, yeah.
What's an Enoch hammer?
Big sledgehammers made by a guy called Enoch. He was a blacksmith.
And these are the people who are going to smash...
They smashed Cartwright's Mill, yeah. They smashed, and it was a failed attempt basically, because when Cartwright... He got tipped off basically, and Cartwright had already enlisted yeomanry, and they were there, and it was a gunfight at the old Gay Corral type of thing. And 2 men died, But Patrick was in fear of his life, and he bought a pair of pistols, matchlock pistols, and he brought them to Thornton. Kept them with him all his life, So it starts in Thornton, and then the book, each chapter moves out further and further, and it goes, as far as Scarborough, to the edge of the north, if you like.
Yeah.
And then the last chapter brings it back here. So that's the structure, is that each chapter is a different landscape. And I go to Cumbria, to Broughton-in-Furness, where Bramwell side an illegitimate child. I go to North Lees, to Hathersage, where Charlotte was spent some time with Ellen Nussey, her best friend, and where Jane Eyre, is set, a lot of it. I go over to Thorpe Green, where Bramwell had an affair with Mrs. Robinson, Lydia Robinson, and came back and was shamed and took to alcohol and opium.
Yeah.
So each chapter really is sort of telling a different story about their lives.
Did Bramwell do much writing?
Well, Bramwell really was the first.
He was like the whatever quality of the family.
Well, Bramwell was the first of them to be published. So he was published as a poet way before any of his sisters. You know, I think he was published first of all in 1840, I think.
And that was it, kind of.
And he was published under a pseudonym. Northumberland was his pseudonym. And it was his idea to write a novel. You know, he was too ill to do it, but basically he realised there was no money in poetry even back then, you know, and had this idea to write a novel, and then his sisters ran with it, you know. So he died without even knowing his sisters became literary successes, you know.
Yeah.
He died in September 1848, just at the cusp of their success, you know. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, I mean, you know, he was the artist to begin with. He was a portrait artist. He had a studio here in Bradford. Only lasted 6 months. Didn't make a career out of it. He then went on to be a tutor and was sacked from several jobs. One in Cumbria, one in Thorpe Green. He never stuck a job basically, and he tried everything. He tried being a railway clerk, got sacked from that. Tutor, artist, poet, you know, he really had lots of different hats and never managed to succeed in any of those.
So was that because he was a drinker? Or
Well, he didn't take to drink till quite late on, you know. He was actually the secretary or the treasurer, I can't remember now, of the Haworth Temperance Society.
Oh, right.
Because Patrick, his father, was teetotal.
Right.
You know, was very much against the demon drink, you know.
Yeah.
And Bramwell for a long time was, I mean, the Temperance Society weren't necessarily made up of teetotalers, but a lot of them were, you know. But the idea that you temper, you know, you don't drink in excess.
Yeah.
And it was only really when Mrs. Robinson, you know, rejected him in 1845. Really, that's when he really took to drink. He was drinking before then, but he really.
So did his sisters did they kind of look out for him?
Well, Emily was the only one at home at that point. So Charlotte was in Brussels and Anne was in Thorpe Green.
So what's Charlotte doing in Brussels?
She was... the idea was that they were going to form a school. They were going to have a girls' school. And she was learning the ropes, basically. She was over there at a girls' school, learning how to do it, if you like.
Right.
But also getting infatuated by the guy who was running the school called Heger. So Heger was a charismatic...
Was this a kind of a business notion then? It was
It never took off.
We'll make some money, we'll have a school and we'll have pupils and stuff.
That was the idea to be... Because, you know, they were parsons' daughters. They had no means of income, really.
Yeah.
You know, and there wasn't really much open to them, really, by way of income. So that was the idea, is that they'd set up their own school and become financially independent. It didn't work out. You know, I think they had 2 people subscribe to it, you know. So you can't live with a school with 2 people. So that was another failed business venture. So at that point, when Bramwell comes back to Haworth, there's only Emily there, really. So Emily kind of nursed him, really. Because he took to drink and he took to opium. And it was a downward spiral, really. You know, it was a downward spiral of addiction. And Emily saw that, you know, and I guess her sisters also experienced it, you know, from a slightly more distant sort of perspective. And I think a lot of their literary characters were kind of influenced by that, you know.
So when did you get the taste for the Brontes then? You know, because you talked about Poe as being sort of he started you off and stuff, but were you kind of aware of Jane Eyre and
well, not at all.
Like 12 and 13 and stuff?
Yeah, not at all, really. I mean, I just read, there weren't any books in the house, really. And I read my sister's books because she was an avid reader, but she'd read Enid Blyton and things like that, you know, so it wasn't particularly literary things I was reading. Poe was the first kind of literary writer, and I got into Gothic fiction through Poe. And of course Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, very much within that genre. Yep. Lovecraft, I've never really taken to Lovecraft, really. I mean, I've read a lot of Lovecraft.
Yeah.
There's something a bit unsavoury about that character, really, which is a different...
What, the writer?
Yeah, Lovecraft, yeah. I mean, he's a massive racist for one thing, isn't it? And if you know that when you read his work, you can see that in his writing, you know. But yeah, I mean, I guess I got into Wuthering Heights, really, and it sounds... you know, basically when I was 7, this is 78. Number 1 was Wuthering Heights. It was Kate Bush, and it was everywhere. You turned on the radio, and you couldn't escape the single Wuthering Heights. I had no idea it was based on a book, but my mother, who was doing the book at night school, because she'd left school at 15, she had no qualifications, she was doing an O-level, and she told me the story of Wuthering Heights. So she told me the story of Heathcliff, and I became, you know, really interested in that story. But it was years after before I actually read the book.
Right.
Fell in love with the book, and then by that token, then got interested in the Brontes. I moved to Thornton, very close to where they were born, and I just got more and more interest, not just in their literary lives, but in their backgrounds.
Yeah.
You know, I just got fascinated by them. Really.
And did your mother carry on with her? Does she sort of do any writing, or was that just something?
No, my mother. I think she felt. I hope she won't mind me saying this. A little bit ashamed of the fact she didn't have any qualifications. She left school at 15 from a very poor Irish family, and my mother basically said,
So
"You've got to."
Where were you from?
Well, Ballina, County Mayo.
Oh, crikey!
But you know, they were a big family. My mum was one of 10.
I was born in Mayo.
Oh yeah.
I was born in St. Our Lady's Hospital, Manor Hamilton.
Wow.
County Mayo, and then. But I lived over there till I was nearly 5 years old.
Which I think I knew that actually, because I think I'd heard an interview of you saying that, and I'd scored that away. So that's another link, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, so she had to leave school at 15 to earn some money for the family because they had no money. But I think she always felt very, you know, aware that she was uneducated, basically. So she went to night school and did some O-levels. But that was it. That was the be-all and end-all. She didn't do anything after that.
Well, that's quite a step because I know a lot of, like my mother, she was 21 when she married, and she was from the north of Ireland. My father was a musician, but he worked in the mines. He was basically physical work. He worked for the Forestry Commission, and he worked the land. And when he came over here, he went straight on the buildings and he shoveled concrete.
Yeah.
And
oh, sorry, that's the answer machine.
oh right, okay.
Chipping in there. Yeah.
But I think my mother was self-conscious about her education, her lack of education.
Yeah.
And I had to go doing a podcast with her about a week ago.
Did you?
And she just basically I was surprised at how kind of anxious she became and quite sort of guarded. Yeah. And she became a little girl. Because she was just, I could see she
Well,
was,
I don't think, you know, I'm guessing your mother's a similar age to mine, you know, that generation don't really feel comfortable about talking about the past, really, and they don't have that interest, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't so much about it, was just the fact that she didn't actually feel sort of, she's shy.
Yeah.
You know, there was a shyness, and she does little, I go and visit her in Otley, and she does a word wheel. We do a polygon together. I'm not sure, but you get like a circle with like 8 letters, and you have to form letters. You have to form words, 3 or 4 letter words. So she goes. I go up there to her house and sit there. We sit there for an hour with doing these puzzles, and she struggles.
Yeah.
she creates new words. She says, "I put down Santus," and I said, "What's Santus?" You know, Sanctus. And I said, "Oh no, it's got a C in it, Mum, and that's Latin, and you can't help it for Latin." You know?
She'd be terrible at Scrabble, wouldn't she?
So, but that's it. You know, she we do a quiz on a Tuesday night, a family quiz, and my mother, she watches from a distance, as it were.
Yeah.
She's on the tablet, and she basically sits there with her foreshortened little hedges. She's away from the tablet because she won't touch it. It's just plugged in 24/7. She doesn't go. I said, "Mum, just pick it up and talk. You know, just hold it to your face." I said, "I'm not touching it. It's plugged in. That's all I need to know." So.
Well, my mother's very much the same. She's not got a mobile phone or a computer or anything like that. You know, I mean, they've only got 4 channels, and I'll say, "Oh, it's an iPlayer, Mum." What's that? iPlayer. You know?
Yeah. She's bought a copy of my book. She's the first, basically the first customer, and she's no idea who these people are. But she just slammed 12 quid on the table. And said, "I'll have one of them, Michael. There you go. I'm buying that now." So she bought, and which she does. You know, she's been there for me. As a kid, I grew up, and I fought against my dad because he had no kind of conception of people like Andy Warhol, we were two different strands, and his culture was like Irish music and Leeds United, and he was a big physical man, and he was teetotal, you know, but he was all about sort of manliness, and he couldn't understand why I didn't want to draw like a little cottage with, you know, do something that was commercial that would make someone. Why do you have to draw these skeletons? You're not going to make any. As long as you've got a hole in your bum, you'll never make any money drawing them things. You know, and he'd no idea Ralph Steadman, you know, that wanted to splash ink everywhere. Yeah. So why? What's all that? You know, and so there was but my mother would, she would accommodate me. I'd be in the kitchen and she'd sit there and I'd talk to her about David Bowie and I'd talk to her about, you know, Andy Warhol, and she'd say, oh, all right. Yes, I saw this great film last night. It was called Flesh for Frankenstein. You know, it's got, and it's, you know, but also and unload, you know. But I would never be able to do that with my father.
Well, I know exactly what you said, because I had exactly the same thing with my parents. My father was a kind of dark, brooding presence, and you didn't talk to him or interact with him at all, really. You know, he wasn't into kids, and he didn't want to. You know, he thought kids should be seen and not heard. You know.
Yeah.
But my mother was much more.
So you had your mum and dad right through your childhood.
Yeah. And my dad was someone you just avoided, basically. You know, he was just, if he was in the room, you would turn around and back out the room.
Yeah, he'd be out in the living room, sitting on the couch with the newspaper, reading it, and going, Kenya disaster flight aircraft 270 destroyed, and you know, and we'd be sitting in the kitchen laughing and sniggering because there's that stupid dad of ours, you know, just reading the newspaper because he was, you know, he was illiterate, you know. We kind of, because we were quite frightened of him and intimidated by him because he was kind of big, fierce, strong guy, and we saw that we had one over on him intelligence-wise.
I switched this off. Right, sorry about that. Carry on.
I was just talking about. I know you're left-handed as well.
Yeah.
So do you write left-handed?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm very left-handed. I do very few things with my right hand.
I'm always surprised at left-handed. I was surprised when I saw Iggy Pop playing guitar left-handed. I thought, because there's something quite kind of awkward about, you know, when you see somebody, because of like I grew up with an attitude that if you were left-handed, it was you needed to be right-handed. That was the right way to do it. The left-handers were dodgy. You know,
you were cat-handed, weren't you? You know,
cat-handed, yeah.
Sinister, you know.
But
there is a disproportionate number of left-handers, isn't there, in the arts world? So
I mean Da Vinci.
Yeah, famous one. Yeah.
But so you draw as well.
I do draw. I've not got any drawings here to show you, but I do draw. I've not drawn for quite a long time, actually, thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, art was my first love. You know, when I was at school, I was picked out of class to do these illustrations for school. You know, so Easter, let's say, I was put in the art room, you know, and left there just to make these big A1 pieces of art that would line the assembly hall. You know, so I loved art before literature, a long time before. You know.
And what about music? Did you ever dabble with music? Did you ever pick up a guitar? Or?
I think because I'm left-handed, I did try and learn the guitar. Me and my mate Al, basically, we both got guitars at the same time. And he said, right, okay, let's form a band. We went off, let's learn to play guitar and we'll form a band. He went away, about 2 weeks later he comes back and he could play anything. And I'm still struggling with the E chord or something. You know?
Yeah.
And he was such a talent. You know, he could just pick any instrument up and just master it. He could hear a few seconds of a tune and then just... You know, I thought I'm never going to compete with that. I'm left-handed. I'm trying to learn it right-handed. I'm trying to learn the guitar in a right-handed way, and the strumming, it's not natural, is it? If you're left-handed, it feels awkward. And I thought I'm going to be competent at the best. You know, my dad's played guitar all his life, and he's still barely competent. You know, and he's 84 now. You know.
So are you getting along better with him now that you...
We get on fine now, actually, you know, from a distance. We get on fine. Once I reached adulthood and left home, actually, the tension kind of went.
Yeah.
And he's a different kind of guy now, you know, he's not angry in the way that he was. He was very
What did your dad do then?
My dad worked in various things, really. He left school at 16, same as me. He worked in factories. when I was young, he mainly worked for the gas board. He fitted gas fires, you know. Did all kinds of things really.
Was he arty? Did he have a...
Well, he was in the sense that he always had things on the go. He was in a band for a bit and he played the washboard and guitar and things like that. It was a skiffle band.
All right, yeah.
And then him and his mate had this comedy act, and they went to all the working men's clubs doing this comedy act. And he was always drawing things, and we had a dog, and I remember him doing this picture of a dog and putting it on the wall. And so he was always dabbling. He was a dabbler.
Oh, yes.
But he never really pursued anything.
Yeah.
You know, he obviously liked, you know, dabbling in
It was
things.
there, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about left-handed. I mean, I dabble. I pick up the guitar, but
Yeah.
I'm basically I'm ambidextrous. I'm left-handed and right-handed, but I draw with my right hand, but I throw a ball and sort of hit the tennis shot with my left. And when I was playing guitar, somebody passed. My brother's got into music and they bought guitars, and I, rather than play it left-handed, because the strings are a certain way, I thought, well, I better follow the rules. So I played it right-handed, and I don't.
The strumming is
right, awful. I just can't get the feel, the funky, the sexiness, whatever. You know,
it's the rhythm, isn't it?
The rhythm, yeah. So it's and I'm big on rhythm.
Yeah.
But so if I'm miming a guitar, I mime it left-handed, but I play it right-handed.
Well, I wish I'd got that at the time I was learning and actually just got a left-handed guitar.
Because my brother's left-handed. He plays upside down guitar. So he basically turned the guitar upside down. Yeah. He plays like Jimi Hendrix did.
And I should have done that really, you know, and I should have pursued it. But anyway, it's too late for that now.
Yeah. And early on this year, we saw you in Halifax, and you came to see the show. We were playing Halifax, and there was a documentary. He was making Artistik, and you brought Craig Sugden with you. And tell us how you met Craig.
Well, Craig is a photographer who works in theatre and film and TV mainly. And I met Craig in Thornton. So Craig lives down south. He mainly works in London, so he lives that neck of the woods. But he bought a house a few years ago in Thornton as a bit of a retreat.
Yeah. He did the documentary about Bronts, didn't he?
He did, yeah, he did that, yeah. And we just got chatting. He was in fact, where I'm looking out the window here, he was stood, there's a bar on the corner here called the Watchmakers.
Yeah.
And we were both, it was a sunny day, and he was stood there with his camera. I could see his expensive camera, and he looked a bit arty, and I thought, who's that guy, you know? So I walked over to him and said, oh, you're a photographer? He said, yeah, and we just got chatting. And we just hit it off, you know, and we've been friends ever since. And we came to see you because, as you know, we've got this project which we've had to put to one side for now, which is a book about the band, you know, about you people, really. And the idea is that it's going to be a mix of photographs and text. So that was the idea, is that Craig would do the photography, I'd do the text. We were getting well stuck into it, and then lockdown comes.
There is some text in it.
There is some text, yeah. I mean, I won't reveal too much about that. Just, yeah.
Watch this space.
We came to your house, when was it? I'm guessing about 6 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, February, I think it was.
Was it, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
I know, I'll tell you when it was February, because the hawthorn was just leafing. And we're talking about bread and cheese, weren't we? How this was the first food of the year. So hawthorn brings its leaves out very early, and it's edible. And we call it bread and cheese. And we were walking through the park, weren't we? And I said, "Oh, look, bread and cheese," and I had a little nibble. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So that's how we can pinpoint really pretty much the week of the visit. And when we were talking in your kitchen stroke dining room, it's an open plan, isn't it? I was recording some of that, so I've got some of that recorded. I don't know if I did that surreptitiously. I don't know if you even realised I was doing it.
Oh no, I didn't realise. Yeah, I'm used to seeing surreptitious little recorders slightly here and there.
But you know, there were bits where it's describing some of the gig, but it was also, you know, much more than that. It'll be to do with the background and the history, and you know, my first introduction to you was actually when I was comparing a night at the Royal Park pub.
Right.
When would that have been then?
This would be 1996, I think it was.
Wow.
And the guy who had the bookshop up the road was off sick, and he rang me up and said, "Can you do this?" And I never compared a night before. I'll give it a go. And Mick, he had to go around with a piece of paper. Said he wants to. It's an open mic night. He wants to perform. And Mick was stood at the back, and he had a tweed jacket on, and he had quite a lot of hair at the time. Had a bit of a quiff, but sort of ginger quiff. And he was carrying one of his brown paper bag portraits. It was a woman's face on this brown paper bag. It was framed. And he was stood at the bar, and I thought, is this guy, what is he? Is he insane? And I went around the room and said, put your name down on the list, and Mick came up and he wrote his name down, and I thought he said Mick Autistic. And I remember introducing you as Mick Autistic and feeling really embarrassed about it, and coming up to you at the bar afterwards and apologising.
Well, I used to get that because people sort of, they thought it was a play on words, they say, oh, it's Mick Autistic.
Yeah, just the way you'd written it in the thing, and it was
a bit
quite
of banter.
lit, and I said Mick Autistic, and I realised that I made a mistake, and I apologised afterwards. And I thought, this guy's interesting. And you got up, I remember you got up, and the first thing you did was you took an OXO cube out of your pocket. And you did the poem about, a cube of OXO.
Oh, right.
And you started rubbing it on your face. And thought, it's a bit Charlie Chuck, actually, thinking about the book you brought with you.
Yeah.
There was a bit Charlie Chuck in there. You weren't quite sure. There was a kind of manic energy there, and you weren't quite sure if it was an act or whether you'd escaped from an asylum. Is he been sectioned, this guy?
Yeah, but we saw you down at Theatre in the Mill as well. I remember a few years ago.
Yeah,
you came a couple of times into the Square Chapel as well.
Well, I must have seen your band, I don't know, 50 times now, maybe more. I don't know. I've seen you at Glastonbury 6 or 7 times, the Latitude 4 or 5 times, all over Yorkshire. So. Yeah.
And I remember asking you to review one of the albums. In fact, you used one of the tracks, Castaway, on one of your plays.
Yeah. So Radio 4 play called Castaway, in fact, it was called Castaway, uses your song. So there's all those links, isn't there, really, going back, 24 years?
Yes.
So it's quite a long time.
Yes, I remember the black-haired Michael Stewart.
Yes,
he's
more.
He's basically the Sisters of Mercy's new singer, I was thinking.
Yeah, I don't have a...
I assumed you were in a band. I assumed that you were sort of, you were dressed for the part. You had a kind of a cavalier quality to you. He's got some dubious habits, I think.
So what do you think the Bronte family would be doing in lockdown?
Well, they were kind of permanently in lockdown. Yeah. Really. Emily, had a foray in Brussels with Charlotte. Mm-hmm. Her auntie died, she came back, and she never left, and she was happy just to stay in that parsonage, baking bread and writing, walking on the moors. Mm-hmm. And that was it. So she would have loved lockdown.
Lockdown life, isn't it? Walking,
she was the kind of pioneer of
she was a lockdown girl.
Maybe
that's the new book.
They didn't didn't they sort of, there was didn't they end up dying of lead poisoning or something because the water was polluted?
Well, they died of consumption of TB. Bramwell first. Bramwell died in September 1848, but then Emily died in December the same year, 3 months after. So she dies December 1848 and dies May 1849, just 5 months after Emily. Yeah. So you've got, in less than a year, you've got Bramwell, Emily and Anne all die of consumption, all die of TB. Yeah. Charlotte lives a little bit longer. She lives till 1854, but she doesn't live a long life, And the mother died in 1821. The 2 eldest siblings died in 1824. So it was a very tragic story, really. Patrick, the father, outlived them all. He lived till I think he was 84 or something like that. So he buried all his children, basically. He buried his wife, he buried all his children, all 6 of them. And it's against nature, isn't it, to outlive you?
To bury your children, yeah.
Yeah, and he put his longevity down to his scarf. He had a very long neckerchief.
Like a face mask.
Yeah. Think about lockdown now, we're all covering our mouths. He was, again, a pioneer of this because they had this miasma theory, didn't they? They thought
the
TB was down to my asthma, down to, you know, the asthma in the air, which is why Anne went to Scarborough, because they thought sea air was cleaner. And
there was a thing about
it was a cure.
Yeah.
It was a cure. Yeah. Of course, it was wrong. It wasn't about that at all. But both eldest siblings, Mariah and Elizabeth, went to a boarding school in Lancashire, and they died of a typhoid outbreak. You know, so. You know, it was, you know, in the context of that time, actually, the mortality rate in Thornton then, I think, was 25. So in the context of that time, it wasn't that unusual to have so many early deaths. But from our perspective, it seems extraordinary, doesn't it?
Well, you think that kind of quality of work and stuff, you imagine that these people are, you've got an idea that they're all like kind of 50, 60-year-old, you know, there's a maturity and a sophistication to the language, but like Catherine Masefield, she was like, she was died in the 30s, she was like 35 or something. Yeah. But just these people were snapped away, but they managed to get something out. There must have been a real fierce fire of creativity to
think that Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, those three classic works of English literature, you know, you think that they were written by women in their mid-20s, early to mid-20s. You know, I don't know what you were doing in your early to mid-20s, but I wasn't writing classic literature. You know, I was trying to cop off with, you know, whoever would.
Watching the Ramones, watching Talking Heads, and listening to whatever, or reading. I was a child. Yeah. It took me 25, 30 years to become 30.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, me too. I was a late developer.
Yeah, this is it. It's all happening. So, you know, I basically I had my foot on the monitor, you know, with a band at 50. That's when I finally kind of thought, shit, I'm in a band. Thanks, Michael, for joining us today. It's been a treat. Michael's latest book is Walking the Invisible, published by HarperCollins, and is an exploration of the landscapes which inspired the Brontes' literature. Details can be found on his website, michael-stewart.org.uk. Michael Stewart's also on Twitter, @headspam, on Facebook, Michael Stewart. And you can listen to this again and download the podcast on iTunes, Mick Artistic's Ego Podcast. Further links can be found on our website, mickartistic.com. Cheers to all the people who keep tuning in, and don't forget to tell your mates, your family, and if you like what you hear, give us a review on Apple Podcasts or on iTunes. Thanks very much. Off you go. Bye.